My name is Catherine Chilcote, and I'm the Patient Care Manager here at the Lancaster office of Caring Hospice Services. I'm extremely blessed to be working with such caregivers as I do: chaplains, social workers, aides, and registered nurses. And being a caregiver is an extremely strenuous position, both physically and emotionally. And when we train people or when we orient people to their positions, we do talk about patient care. We talk about infection control. We talk about proper body mechanics. But rarely do we ever discuss boundaries. And what I know to be true is boundaries are an essential part of caring for the caregiver. It allows caregiving to be sustainable. It prevents compassion fatigue. So I said to my wonderful social workers, if they could put together something that we could use not only for the existing employees, but the future employees to come. And so that's why you're seeing us here today. I'd like to introduce my three wonderful social workers: Alexis Murray, Denise Allman, and Kathy Hoover.
Okay, so some of the things that you can expect to learn today are what are boundaries, the importance of them, different types of boundaries, what to do when they've been crossed, and how to go above and beyond in your job while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. The definition of boundaries from dictionary.com would be a line that marks the limit of an area. So our personal boundaries are rules and limitations that we set for ourselves that dictate what we do in our lives. They explain what are appropriate and inappropriate behaviors. These come from things like our confidence, our self-worth, and our values. For each of us, they're individualized and they're different for everyone. While our personal boundaries are different, our professional boundaries should be the same for everyone. These are guidelines coming from our policies, our legal and ethical frameworks that decide what are appropriate interactions that we have with our clients. So why are boundaries important? Well, first and foremost, they prevent caregiver burnout. They also keep the caregiver in the therapeutic zone. So that's that balance of somebody not being too involved or being under involved. It also prevents what's called transference and countertransference. So transference is when the client sees the caregiver as somebody in their own life. So that would be like the client seeing a CNA as their granddaughter. While countertransference is the opposite. That is where the caregiver sees the client as somebody in their life. So that would be like you seeing the client as your grandma. And that's really important that that doesn't happen, because it lets us getting over involved, or it allows them to get over involved. And we may have interactions or say things that wouldn't be appropriate otherwise. It also keeps the power of the caregiver in balance. So whether you realize it or not, the caregiver has more power in this relationship. You know things about their medical history, their social security number, their finances even, that gives you more power. And if you think about it, you have the power to leave this relationship whenever you want. You can go get another job or go do something else. And that leaves that vulnerable person in an even more vulnerable state when you do that. So like I said, it keeps the power of them in balance. A key question that we want you to think about throughout this entire presentation is this for me or my client? Whenever you do something, you want to make sure that you're doing it for your client and not for yourself. Here are different types of boundaries, and we're going to go over into each of them individually. So the first boundary I want to talk to you about is sharing personal information. This would be talking to your clients about your own personal life and problems. This could be sharing information that the client didn't ask for or didn't need. It's also things like showing pictures. This can cause the client to see you more as a family member or a friend, and it takes away that professional feel that they have for you. It also can take Allow the client to take on your stress on top of their own. We recognize that most of your clients have dementia and you often have one-sided conversations, so it's easy to talk about yourself. And we're not saying that you can't do that, but just make sure that you're keeping your conversations light and not over-involved about your own life. Ways to stay in bounds would be using caution to share personal information, making sure that when you're sharing information, it's for therapeutic purposes and not for social purposes. If you're waiting to tell the client something, it's probably not appropriate for you to share it. Giving the client the opportunity to take the lead in a conversation and staying quiet is a great tip because you never know what they're going to say while you're staying quiet. So the second boundary I want to talk about is emotions and not recognizing symptoms. So this would be a caregiver allowing their emotions to get in the way of seeing a client's reactions as symptomatic or part of the disease. So a good example of this would be if a client was lying and the caregiver took that personally. The reality behind a lie could be that they're not processing their disease, they're grieving, or they're hiding something because they're afraid to tell you. There's so much more that goes into that lie than just it being something to hurt you. So recognizing all of their behaviors as part of their disease is really important. In worst cases of a caregiver not recognizing this, it could be neglect. You could also miss out on important information and you can lose sight of the caregiving role. So ways to stay in bounds would be recognize once again that the client's behaviors are part of their disease. Know your care plan. If something is out of the care plan or if you're not following it, that could be a sign of this boundary being crossed. And if you're also about to take something personally, take a step back, talk to a supervisor, and then address that caregiver or that client later on.
On this next slide, we will be talking about nicknames and endearments. Crossing the boundary. What you don't want to do crossing the boundary is calling a patient sweetie or honey. Also, changing a patient's name by making it sound younger. An example of this would be calling Richard Ricky. I had a personal example. My mother was on hospice and she had a caregiver that came to the home and called her sweetie or honey. Now, knowing my mother, she was never called sweetie or honey throughout her life, and she didn't care for it. We ended up having to get a different aide because she just wasn't comfortable with that kind of a term. So I just wanted to give a personal example of how you can cross the boundary with your patient. The next slide we will look at is unprofessional demeanor. How do you cross the boundary with unprofessional demeanor? Well, by having an unprofessional appearance. Also having an inappropriate tone and volume in your voice. Oftentimes our patients are very hard of hearing, so we don't want to yell at them. We do raise our voices, but we don't want to be perceived as yelling at them. Just slow down when you're talking to them and possibly use a whiteboard as you're communicating. Also, we don't want to have inappropriate body language. Look open toward your population, your client, and welcoming. Don't appear closed. Finally, talking about our client in front of them and not including them in the discussion could be perceived as being unprofessional. How can we stay in bounds? You can maintain good personal hygiene and a professional appearance. Use appropriate language with proper tones and volumes. No inappropriate jokes, racial slurs, or profanity. Be mindful of your body language. And finally, talk to your clients, not around them. Professional demeanor is how others perceive you. Your personal demeanor can be very different from your professional one. We also have a company dress code that you can look into to see what is appropriate attire for work. Our next slide is touch. How do you cross the boundary with touch? Hugging. Inappropriate touch that makes the client feel uncomfortable. How can we stay in bounds? We can use touch when it serves a useful purpose for our client. Make sure the patient is comfortable with touch. Ask before you give a hug. Make sure any touch is used for your client's needs, not your own. Be aware that the client may react differently than you expected. Touch can be very healing. We use hand-holding as empathy, especially for our clients who are actively dying or have confusion, but touch should be used sparingly and thoughtfully. The next slide is gifts and favors. How do we cross the boundary? By giving and receiving gifts and doing special favors on and off the clock. How do we stay in bounds? Do not accept gifts from patients. Practice ways of declining gifts, drinks, and food gracefully. It is okay to say you are not allowed to accept gifts because of the policy. Avoid using personal finances to purchase gifts. We blur the line between our personal and our professional relationship when we accept gifts and favors. Accepting a gift from a client may be viewed as fraud or theft by their family or another employee. If you see a need, please notify your RN case manager and social worker. There may be funds available through our community liaison or our caring administrator. Our next slide is over-involvement. Crossing the boundary would look like spending too much time with a client, seeing clients when off-duty, thinking you are the only one who can care for that patient, and trading assignments to be with the patient. How do we stay in bounds? Don't see or communicate with the patient after hours or off the clock. Give each patient a quality visit with the same amount of care and attention. Check in with yourself, see if you are becoming too involved. And finally, do not contact clients out of care plan or after program is complete. We need to find the balance between over and under involvement. Keep in mind this can go the other way and we can be perceived as under-involved, which may look like disinterest or neglect. Just remember, these are all recommendations and guidelines. We are not perfect, we are human. We often go the extra mile for our patients. That is what makes us Caring Hospice.
Okay, crossing boundaries. One example is flirting, sexual jokes, sexual advances, and when we talk about these things, we're talking about our client is the patient and also their families. It's normal for us to feel attracted or some attraction, and when you recognize that, it's never suitable to act on those feelings. Discourage improper behaviors by clients and seek help from your supervisor if you are feeling attracted towards the client. Keeping secrets between you and the client is not the same as confidentiality. So staying in bound, do not keep any personal or health-related secrets with clients. I want to just say a little bit about tidbit on that, and that is all of our clients and their families are already working in their own grief about their diagnosis and their prognosis, and adding information regarding ourselves as a caregiver will just burden them more and give them more stress. Remember, your role is to make referrals to other team members if it is relevant to share any information health-wise, and document all client interactions. texting client after hours. This is huge, especially in the technology world today. We know everybody have a big heart, but we need to know our limitations. Having conversations that are not work-related is, as much as possible, a no-no. Being friends with clients on social media, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, and that's a big violation. And also checking clients' social media after hours. So to stay in bound, you have to keep your social media private and do not accept our clients, our patients as friends. You use texting only if you are going to discuss something that's pertinent to the information for their own health, or as your role with your role with the company. And then to recognize texting is a communication with client that's supposed to be and should be documented thoroughly and accurately. Okay, the next one will be contacting another employee or coworker while they are on vacation or on sick leave or maternity leave. Disclosing information about another coworker, it's almost like a HIPAA violation, and talking negatively about other coworkers, hospices or facilities to clients. It's just a major violation, so you should not be talking about this company or that company just because you're trying to compare between the two. We love our own, but it's always good to be very private about it. What you can do is you respect your coworkers' time off, not discussing work after hours, and being respectful towards another employee, staying professional when working with outside agencies or other hospices. Okay, these are the suggestions on what to do when boundaries have been crossed. First one is you talk to your coworker. You request a supervisor to discuss what had happened. Another one is maybe asking your supervisor to be reassigned somewhere or reassigned to another patient. Have conversation with the client discussing boundaries and what is acceptable.
So in conclusion, even though we have all of these rules and boundaries set for us, that doesn't mean you can't still be an exceptional caregiver and do exceptional things to put you above and beyond in your job. We know here at Caring Hospice, we take pride in having relationships with our clients. So here are some ways that you can still be an above beyond caregiver but stay within boundaries. You can do things like take your client outside or read them their favorite book. You can also make sure they're well groomed, make sure their nails are cleaned and their beards are trimmed every time you see them. Use empathy and active listening when you're talking to the caregiver. You can also do things like the aromatherapy kits, making sure that you're holding their hands at end of life, as well as calling the social worker, a chaplain, or nurse when there's a problem right away. That urgency that they feel from us and making sure that they're okay is really important. And these are just a few examples. There's so many other ways that you can be an exceptional caregiver but still stay within healthy boundaries for yourself and for the client. So thanks for watching our video. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the Lancaster office.